The laughter echoed through the marble halls, like knives scraping glass. Liana kept her eyes down, hands trembling slightly, as she pushed the mop along the edge of the corridor. It was her first week working at Clearwater Academy, a school known for wealth, not warmth. At 24, she was barely older than the students, though their eyes looked at her like she was beneath them, a shadow in their bright, glittering world. She wore a simple gray uniform, too thin for the air conditioning and too tight for comfort, and sensible black shoes. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, and her movements were small, careful. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to work and disappear. But the rich don't let ghosts pass quietly. "Hey, maid girl." One of the boys had sneered that morning, tossing an empty soda can her way. "You missed a spot. Right here, under my shoe." Others laughed. She forced a polite nod, swallowed her pride like bile, and bent down. That was when she noticed the ringleader Mason. Tall, smug, wealthy. The kind of boy who thought the world owed him amusement. He wasn't even subtle. He filmed her from his phone as she crouched, murmuring to his group, "Bet she's doing this for rent money. Maybe I'll leave a tip." She didn't cry. Not then. But her ears burned. By the second day, they knew her schedule. When she mopped, when she took out the trash, they followed. They stared. They laughed. They whispered things she couldn't quite hear or refused to believe. But one phrase caught her. "She probably likes it." That afternoon, she asked to clean the science building instead. The supervisor shrugged. "If they're making it hard, just don't react. They'll stop." They didn't. In fact, it got worse. The worst part wasn't the names Mop Girl, Maid Barbie, Skirt Service. It was the smirks, the boldness, the way the girls in the group giggled along complicit. One girl even tripped her once, then fake apologized while filming. But Liana stayed silent. She always stayed silent. What they didn't know, what no one at this school knew, was that Liana wasn't always like this. She had once been fierce. She had once survived worse than spoiled teenagers. There was a reason she walked with her back always straight, even when it trembled. There was a reason she didn't scream, didn't run, didn't crumble. But even steel can crack under enough pressure. And when it did, they would regret every step that brought them to that hallway. It happened on a Friday, always the worst day. The school was hosting a charity exhibition in the grand hallway filled with student-made art and presentations. Teachers milled about, parents occasionally visited, and students buzzed in uniformed packs. Liana had been told to tidy up around the exhibits and ensure no trash cluttered the floor. She wore her usual uniform, gray skirt, white blouse, tucked neatly cleaning belt snug around her waist. They saw her before she saw them. Mason, flanked by two other boys, and a girl holding a smoothie, leaned against the lockers like royalty surveying their kingdom. When Liana turned the corner with her cart, the whispers began. "She's here," Mason muttered loud enough for his crew to snicker. Liana kept her gaze forward. She focused on a discarded snack wrapper near the sculpture of a metallic horse and reached down to grab it. "Yo, don't you think that skirt's a little short?" one of them said. "Yeah," Mason smirked. "Looks like she's begging for attention." That made the smoothie girl laugh. "Maybe we should give her what she's asking for." Liana froze. Her heart pounded, but she stayed still. She picked up the wrapper, stood up slowly, and turned to walk toward the other end of the corridor. The next moment happened so fast, yet for her it played out in slow motion. As she passed Mason, he reached out swift and without hesitation and yanked the back of her skirt downward. Her gray uniform slid to her knees. Gasps exploded. Some laughed. Phones were raised instantly. Her legs, bare beneath the skirt, stiffened in shock. She stood frozen in full view of the crowd, her face drained of all color. Her hands didn't even move to pull her skirt up, not yet. Not while her mind was still spinning. "Oops," Mason said with a wide grin. Wardrobe malfunction. The laughter was deafening. Flashes from phone cameras lit the corner like lightning. One student shouted, Upload it. Upload it now. And then silence. A breath. A shift. Something invisible but sharp filled the air around Liana. She reached down slowly, pulled up her skirt without a word, tied it tightly at the waist, and turned around. Mason was still grinning, thinking he'd won. That's when Liana looked him dead in the eyes. Something flickered in her pupils, something ancient trained and no longer willing to be small. She took one step forward. Mason scoffed, still cocky. What, you gonna cry? Maybe. He never finished the sentence. Liana's body moved before he could blink. Her left foot pivoted slightly. Her right arm bent at a perfect 90 degrees. Then snap, her elbow drove upward into his jaw with brutal precision. The sound of impact echoed through the corridor. Mason's head snapped back. His body folded backward, like paper collapsing against the lockers with a grown phone clattering to the floor. The smoothie girl screamed. One of the boys shouted, "Holy!" But Liana didn't speak. She stood still, her breathing calm, her elbow still slightly raised from the strike. The laughter had stopped. The cameras dropped. Every witness stared in stunned silence. A Maid, the mop girl, had just knocked out the most popular boy in school with a single move. No one could look away, and Liana, she didn't look back. The silence that followed Mason's fall was louder than the chaos before it. Students stared at Liana as if seeing her for the first time, not as the meek maid with downcast eyes, but as someone entirely different. Her stance was firm, balanced, as if she'd trained for this. As if that elbow strike wasn't a reaction, but instinct. And in truth, it was. Somewhere deep inside her, something had awakened. Or rather, something long buried had risen. She stood over Mason's slumped body only for a moment before turning away and walking briskly down the hall, past the stunned crowd, past the teachers who were just arriving on the scene, and into the nearest supply room. She locked the door behind her and pressed her back against it, her chest heaving now, not with fear, but with release. Her fingers trembled as she removed her cleaning gloves. A flash of memory surged through her. Her brother Diego, tall and lean, guiding her hands as a teenager. "You don't need to be big to defend yourself," he'd said in their cramped, graffiti-lined kitchen. "You need control, precision. Use their arrogance. Turn their weight against them. You don't have to fight often, but when you do, you finish it." Diego had been a security guard before he vanished, caught in a street fight that left him hospitalized and then gone from her life entirely. But his training had stayed. Late-night drills, reflex exercises, sparring sessions using mop handles and broomsticks. Liana had buried all that when she took this job. She promised herself she'd never fight again. Not in a place like this. Not when her record, her peace, her salary were so fragile. But they tore it from her. Humiliation in front of a crowd, her body exposed, her dignity shredded. Her strike hadn't been revenge. It was reflex. It was survival. A knock at the door made her stiffen. Liana came, a soft voice, surprisingly gentle. It was Ms. Hargrove, the literature teacher. She wasn't like the others. She often gave Liana tea during breaks. "Are you okay? Mason's being taken to the nurse. No one's blaming you, but we need to talk." Liana opened the door slowly. To her shock, several teachers stood nearby. One of the assistant principals as well. But none of them looked angry. They looked uncertain, concerned. "You defended yourself," Ms. Hargrove said gently. "I saw what they did, and so did many others." Liana nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "He pulled my skirt down." The assistant principal cleared his throat. "We're aware, and we'll be reviewing the footage. Some students recorded everything. We're contacting their parents as we speak." "Footage?" Her chest tightened. "It's already on social media," Ms. Hargrove added grimly. "But most of it is on your elbow strike. And honestly, people are calling you a hero." Hero. Liana didn't feel like one. She felt exposed, vulnerable, raw. Not just from the assault, but from what she had to do to reclaim herself. Still, somewhere deep inside, there was also pride. Not in the violence, but in the fact that she didn't crumble, that she'd stood tall. The administrator asked her gently, "Would you like to take the rest of the day off?" She shook her head. "No, I have 2 more halls to finish." They stared at her, this girl, in a maid's uniform, with steel in her spine, and understood. She wasn't there just to clean the school. She was there to remind them that respect was not about uniforms or titles. And sometimes, strength comes wrapped in silence, until someone dares to tear it open. The following Monday, Clearwater Academy felt different. No one said it outright, but the hallways carried a tension that hadn't been there before, like the school itself was holding its breath. Rumors had already reached every classroom. The maid knocked Mason out. She moved like a soldier. The video hit 80K views before it got taken down. Liana arrived early, as always. She walked the same polished corridor, pushing her cart with the same quiet focus. But this time, heads turned differently. There were no jeers, no mocking whispers, no thrown trash. Just wide eyes and long silences. She wasn't invisible anymore. But she wasn't humiliated either. She was feared, respected. 2 younger students, maybe sophomores, moved aside quickly when she passed. A teacher nodded at her. A senior girl whispered to her friend, "That's her, the maid who did the elbow thing." And then came the unavoidable moment. Mason. He was back. Bruised jaw, faint swelling around one eye. Still dressed in designer clothes, still surrounded by people, but something had changed. His walk was slower. His shoulders weren't as high. He spotted Liana from across the hallway. For a second, their eyes met. The tension was a blade between them. Liana didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Mason did. He turned and walked in the other direction. That, more than the elbow, was the true moment of victory. Later that day, during lunch hour, she was called to the office. Not the principal's, but the small conference room beside it, a place usually reserved for staff meetings or discreet disciplinary action. Inside sat Mason and his mother. Liana hesitated in the doorway. The air felt heavy. "Come in, please," said Mr. Keene, the assistant principal. She entered and stood, hands clasped in front of her. Mason's mother was well-dressed, sharp eyes, a cold elegance to her tone. But what she said surprised everyone in the room. "I want to apologize on behalf of my son," she said calmly. "I was shown the footage. I saw what happened. It was inexcusable." Liana blinked. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Mason looked down, cheeks flushed red. He muttered, "I'm sorry." Liana still didn't speak. Not for a long time. Finally, she said softly, "It wasn't just the skirt." Mason glanced up, confused. "You followed me, filmed me, mocked me for days." His mother turned to him sharply. "You didn't tell me that." He didn't respond. Mr. Keene cleared his throat awkwardly. "We are taking disciplinary measures. Mason will be suspended for a week and required to attend sensitivity training. And we're implementing a new harassment prevention policy campus-wide." Liana nodded. It was something. Not everything, but something. After the meeting, as she stepped into the hallway again, she exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. She didn't feel triumphant, just lighter. She passed a group of students whispering behind their lockers. When she turned toward them, they stopped instantly. One of them even bowed her head. By the end of the day, someone left a folded note by her mop cart. Inside, "Thank you for standing up." Unsigned, but powerful. That night, Liana sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, sipping cheap tea, staring at the stars. The city hummed below, but in her chest, there was calm. She had been humiliated, she had been cornered, but she had not been broken, and she would never be ignored again. By the end of the week, Liana had become an unexpected symbol. Not a celebrity, not a fighter, but something quieter, something stronger. The video may have been pulled from major platforms, but its ripples remained. The incident sparked conversations throughout Clearwater Academy. Teachers began holding advisory sessions on consent and boundaries. Students who had once laughed behind their screens now looked over their shoulders. And Liana kept mopping the floors. She didn't strut. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence was its own message. Her presence now undeniable. But not everyone had forgotten how they treated her. That Friday afternoon, after most students had left, a soft knock came at the janitor's closet, where Liana was organizing supplies. It was Brielle, the smoothie girl. Designer shoes, fake lashes, trembling lips. "I know you probably hate me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Liana looked up, wary but calm. Brielle's eyes watered. "I laughed. I recorded it. I didn't stop him. I don't even know why I did it. I just followed." Liana didn't speak. She just waited. "I watched the video again." Brielle continued. "I saw your face. You weren't just shocked. You were hurt. And I helped do that to you." Liana finally said, "You did. I'm sorry," Brielle whispered, voice breaking. "And not because people are mad at me. Because I see it now. What it looked like. What it was." Liana studied her for a long time. Then gently, she said, "Change isn't what you say in here." She touched her own chest. "It's what you do out there." Brielle nodded, wiped her eyes. "I'll do better." She left. Liana stood alone again, but lighter somehow. As if releasing a small weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying. As she exited the closet, ready to lock up, she found herself face to face with Mr. Keene. He held an envelope. "This is from the board," he said. "They've approved a scholarship, a full ride if you want to enroll in evening classes." Liana stared. "What, Bo? You told us before you had to drop out of college to care for your grandmother. This is our way of saying, we see you now." Her lips parted. She wanted to say no, pride bristled in her chest. But then she remembered Diego's voice. "Take the tools life offers. Fight smart." She nodded. As she walked out into the dusk, the sky painted in soft amber hues, a group of students passed her, not laughing, not mocking. One of them even held the door for her, the same door that had once slammed behind her in mockery, now opened in silence. Liana stepped out into a world that still held cruelty, but also potential. Her elbow strike hadn't just silenced Mason. It had broken something open in the culture of that school. Something ugly had been dragged into the light, and in that exposure there was healing, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever been laughed at, looked down on, shoved aside. She walked home that evening with the same mop cart she'd always pushed, but her shoulders were taller. Her gaze was level, and her silence now carried weight. And the school, it would never see Maids the same way again. Sometimes, dignity is mistaken for weakness until it's tested. Liana's story reminds us that strength doesn't always shout. It doesn't always wear uniforms or come with titles. Sometimes it mops floors, quietly endures humiliation, and rises only when the last line is crossed. In a world that often judges worth by status, her quiet defiance became a lesson in human value. Her elbow strike wasn't about violence. It was a reclaiming of power of self. It forced an entire community to reflect on how they see the invisible people around them. The lesson: never assume silence means surrender, because the ones who bear the most with grace are often the ones capable of changing everything with a single, precise moment of courage. And when you find yourself underestimated or disrespected, remember, Liana, you don't have to roar to be powerful. You just have to stand when it matters most.